Hello everyone, welcome to Options with Doug, streaming live on Monday and Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Bookmap Discord and the Bookmap YouTube channel. Before I get started, I need to go through the disclosures. General disclosure, all Bookmap limited materials, information, and presentations are for educational purposes only and should not be considered specific investment advice nor recommendations. Risk disclosure, trading futures, equities, and options involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Here's my contact information. The best way to get in touch with me is through Discord. My name on Discord is Doug P. Also in Bookmap Discord, there's an Options-Doug chat channel. You can post questions, comments, and content related to the topics of my presentation and the topics of the channel that I'll go through in just a moment. I'm also on X. My name there is @Pless. Here are the key tenets to my approach to trading. I believe that options trades and market maker hedging activity are key drivers of price in many stocks and futures. That certainly applies to the large cap tech stocks like the Magnificent Seven stocks, as well as the equity index futures like the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ 100. And for the S&P 500, SPX is the underlying index, SPY is the ETF version of that index, and the ES futures contract is a derivative of SPX. And when traders buy and sell puts and calls in SPX and SPY, market makers take the opposite side of those trades and they hedge their delta exposure with ES futures. And for the NASDAQ 100, NDX is the underlying index, QQQ is the much more liquid ETF version of that index, and the NQ futures contract is a derivative of NDX. And just like the S&P 500, when traders buy and sell puts and calls in NDX and QQQ, market makers take the opposite side of those trades and they hedge their delta exposure with NQ futures. The focus of my presentation today and the focus of the Options-Doug chat channel is options order flow, the impact of options markets on stocks and futures, and the influence of market maker hedging flow on price action. I have a two-step process for trading. The first is planning, and I use positional analysis. I look at how traders and market makers are positioned in the options market and how those positions change from day to day to develop a thesis regarding the expected trading range and volatility for the day as well as the directional bias. And the second step in my process is execution. I look at real-time order flow on Bookmap and real-time market maker hedging flow on Spotgamma Hero to confirm my thesis and for setups. And when I talk about setups, I will be focusing on an underlying asset. And setups in that asset can be taken with futures contracts, shares of stock, or options, depending on the asset as well as the way you like to trade. Questions and comments are welcome, and I will be watching both the Options-Doug chat channel as well as the chat and YouTube for your questions and comments. Please feel free to post. I'll do my best to answer your questions. All right, let's get started. Here's my agenda for today, Monday, November 17th. First of all, I want to go over news items, economic data, events, and earnings for the week. Then I'll go through my positional analysis. Then I'll review some setups earlier today. Then I'll take a look at the live market. And when I get to the live market, if anyone has any stocks they want me to take a look at, please let me know and I'll be glad to do that. All right, let's get started with news items. And I'm going to go to the Spotgamma dashboard home screen. And let's start with data releases. So, of course, the government was shut down for a good bit of the month of October and reopened last week. And the data releases, to me, are not exactly clear what's coming up. First of all, normally housing data would come out on Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Now, the FOMC minutes will come out at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, the September jobs report will be released from the BLS. So that's the September jobs report on Thursday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, I assume. And then more housing data at 10 a.m. Potentially. Then on Friday, 9:45 a.m., S&P Global PMI, so that's private, so that will come out, as well as the Michigan Consumer Sentiment, the final reading at 10 a.m. All right, so that's the data. Now, expirations, Wednesday is VIX expiration, and then Friday is the monthly options expiration. So let's take a look at that, and let's go to this expiration concentration chart on the Spotgamma dashboard home screen. This is showing market maker delta notional on the vertical axis and expiration date on the horizontal axis. So that is the current November expiration, and looks like it's slightly call dominated. That's the orange bars showing positive delta called positive delta versus put negative delta. So it's very small compared to the December expiration. So kind of a minor expiration coming up in November. All right, let's talk about earnings now. So coming up this week, and everybody's talking about this. This could be the event that turns the market or drives the market for the rest of the year. The big event is NVIDIA earnings. Could reinvigorate the AI trade. So we'll see. So NVIDIA reports earnings after the market closes on Wednesday. According to Spotgamma, the expected move is plus or minus 6.63%. All right, so that's the week. Big day, of course, is Wednesday. VIX expiration, FOMC minutes, NVIDIA earnings, and then the monthly options expiration on Friday. All right, let's move on. And let's take a look now. Let's move on to positional analysis. And I'm going to start with the S&P 500. This is the ES Futures and Bookmap. And let me point out a couple of key levels on this chart. And then we'll take a look at the underlying index charts. So first of all, I have SPX levels, SPY levels, and key ES levels shown in this on these white lines here. And that is the SPX 6700 large gamma 3 level that was noted as support in the Spotgamma AM Founders Note. So far doing its job. And then here's the SPX 6750 level. Around that level acted as a resistance earlier today after the cash open. All right, so let's step back. Let's take a look at a higher time frame. I'm going to go to the underlying index charts, start with SPX, start with a 1 year, 1 day chart. Of course, the rally that began in April still intact. Let's focus on more recent price action. Here's the October 10th tariff tantrum, and SPX rallied after that. Broke out above this resistance level on October 24th after CPI data was released, up to a high of 69.20, and then it's been consolidation and up and down chop after that. So let's take a look now at a closer time frame. Let's go to a 30-day 1 hour chart. Here's the October 10th tariff tantrum. October 24th, breakout above this resistance zone here, 67.50 to maybe 67.70, up to a high of 69.20, and then a pullback, broke down below that support resistance level, and now SPX is trading back down below that 67.50 to 70 level. Well, let's take a look at the levels on this chart, and I'm going to start with the expected moves. The weekly expected moves are shown with the dashed purple lines. These are based on the options market and based on the closing price for SPX from last Friday, Note I did post these in Discord yesterday afternoon. Absolutely no response. If I don't get any response, if nobody's using this, I'm going to stop posting it. All right, so that's the weekly expected moves. Those levels remain in place for the entire week. Then the daily expected moves, also based on the options market. This is again based on the closing price for SPX from Friday. I do post those levels again every day for SPX, ES, and NQ. Every day the evening before. If nobody's looking at it, I'm going to stop posting it. It does take my time, take up my time. All right, let's focus now on the Spotgamma levels. These are shown with the dark red lines. They're based on gamma-weighted open interest. They're provided to Spotgamma subscribers. I'm going to point out the key daily levels. First of all, the absolute gamma strike is back down at 6,000, and it moved down to 6,000 on Friday. Floyd's Garage, welcome. Glad you're here. Yeah, if you want to see it, you have to get on Discord. It's easy to join Discord. Just go to bookmap.com and community and then join Discord. And you'll need to verify your account. And if you don't have Bookmap, you can sign up for a free version. All right, so that is the absolute gamma strike. Moved down to 6,000 on Friday, remains in place at 6,000. So it has been pinging between 6,000 and 7,000. Back down to 6,000 now. All right, next level up is the put wall at 66.50. That's a strike with a large net negative gamma that can be expected to act as support. So if SPX continues to move lower, expect that level to act as support. It did earlier. It did a week before last. On Friday, week before last. All right. Again, that's the strike with a large net negative gamma acting as support. Next level up is the volatility trigger at 67.70. Then a Spotgamma's proprietary volatility and gamma flip level. Below that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is negative. In a negative gamma environment, market makers have to trade with price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to enhance or increase volatility. Above that level, market makers' position on the gamma curve is positive. In a positive gamma environment, market makers have to trade against price to hedge their delta exposure. That tends to subdue or decrease volatility. Note that is based on Spotgamma's older total open interest model that makes certain assumptions. And we'll take a look at gamma, a view of gamma based on their newest synthetic open interest model that doesn't make the same assumptions. And that is typically the view of gamma that I rely on, the newer. And we'll see that in the trace gamma heat map. All right, the volatility trigger and the put wall both move lower compared with Friday, and then again, the absolute gamma strike moved lower on Friday. It remains at 6,000, and then the call wall at 7,000 remains in place. That's a strike with large net positive gamma that can be expected to act as a resistance. And if SPX does attempt to rally, let's say NVIDIA's earnings are great and the market likes it, and the market rallies, that would be the logical highest target, perhaps for end of year. All right, let's wrap up our view of SPX with a 1-minute chart. Whoops. 1-minute chart. Here we go. All right, so here's this support resistance zone that has been in place for several weeks that I mentioned before. SPX trading down below that, making lower highs that began last Friday. midday on Friday. After the gap down, the huge rally, and then resistance at 67.70, and then price breaking lower. So far, finding support right at 6,700 that I mentioned before. Large Gamma 3 level noted as support in the Spotgamma AM Founders Note. All right, so that's a current view of SPX in a 1-minute chart. Let's take a quick look at SPY, the other underlying index component, and some SPY levels have been in play for today. That's why I like to look at these individual charts to isolate these levels. So let's zoom in a bit on this. So levels in play. Overall range for the day. Here's the volatility trigger at 673. Around that level, acting as resistance. And then down on the downside here, 668 round number level, as well as a combo 3 level at 668.02. Then here's the large gamma or absolute gamma strike at 670. And note for SPY, the volatility trigger also shifted lower, but the call wall shifted higher, up to 700. All right, back to Bookmap. And let's take a look at some of these levels in play. So again, I mentioned the 6,700 level in play. Then there's that SPY 668 level, and then the combo level just above that, also acting as support. And then on the upside, the 6750, and there was a large gamma bar, positive gamma bar at 6755, acting as resistance around that level, and we'll see that in the trace gamma heat map. And note there is a difference in price between ES and SPX, and that those index relationships change every day. Right now, the ES to SPX offset is 21. ES minus SPX is 21. Note that is also something that I post in Discord. Looks like this morning there was no interest in that. So if no one is interested in that, I'll stop posting that as well. So if you like that, give me a thumbs up. If not, I will stop posting it and save a little bit of my time. All right, so that is the S&P 500. We'll talk about setups in just a couple minutes. Let's take a look now at NASDAQ. Go to the NQ futures. And let's step back. Let's take a look at the underlying index chart so we can isolate some of the levels in play. And I'm going to start with QQQ. All right, let's zoom in. So you can see before the cash open, resistance at the 615 volatility trigger. And then after the open, resistance around the 612 round number level. That's not a Spotgamma level. And then support right around the 605 round number level. Then the 610 large gamma 2 level in play. All right, that's QQQ. Those are the levels in play. Let's take a look at NDX, the other underlying index component. There are two levels in play, not really acting as support or resistance. First is the 25,000 large gamma 3 level, and then the 0 gamma level at 24,944. All right, back to Bookmap. So there's the resistance. Oops, I mislabeled that. That is the 615 volatility trigger. So that was before the cash open. Then so far, lows of the day, right around the QQQ 605 level. And again, we'll take a look at setups in just a couple of minutes. All right, so that's NASDAQ. Shifts in levels. For NDX, the volatility trigger shifted lower, and there were no other changes in levels for NDX. And for QQQ, there were no changes in levels. All right, again, we'll take a look at setups in just a couple of minutes. So let's wrap up our positional analysis by taking a look at Gamma, and we'll go to the Trace Gamma heat map. Again, this is going to be based on the newer synthetic open interest model, and this is what I look at. The red shading indicates negative gamma, and again, remember in negative gamma, we're looking for higher volatility, more rapid price movement, swings in price. Then in positive gamma, looking for lower volatility. Let's take a step back. Let's go back to earlier in the day. So starting at 9:30, we see red shading, negative gamma all around, and some positive gamma coming in at 67.55, and around that level acted as a resistance earlier today, and that was a very good entry point for a short. Whether you trade ES futures, SPY shares, SPY options, SPX options, good entry point for a short there with a target, first target at 67.10. That is that large positive gamma GEX bar there. So that indicates market makers have positive gamma, so they're long puts there, and traders are short puts, so they were selling puts at that level, and then also down at 66.60. So let's step through. And price for SPX, this is a 5-minute candlestick chart, move down, and then move down below the 67.10 level. Remember again, we talked about support at 6,700. So finding support at 6,700. And that's the current picture, still in negative gamma, with the hero signal shown here continuing to move lower, indicating traders are taking negative delta options positions. They're buying puts and or selling calls. So we'll take a look at that in just a moment. All right, so that's a current picture. 6,700 support and in negative gamma. All right, so let's move on. Let's take a look at some setups now. And as always, I'm going to start with the S&P 500, and I'm going to take a look at look at options trades, look at how traders are trading options and how that is impacting price. All right, so I'm going to start with the S&P 500 index signal. There are two signals that we can take a look at. The first is the index signal, and the second is the equity signal. All right, so let's start and go back to this short in the morning. All right, so what this is showing is in the S&P 500, there was a bullish opening drive, whereas the hero signal was sloping slightly down. So let's take a closer look at that. I'm going to shift to puts and calls. All right, so again, we're on the index signal, and what we're showing now is puts and calls. Orange line shows calls, blue line shows puts. I'm going to jump back. And by the way, I'm using the older version of Hero here. It's when I jump from one symbol to another, I find it a little bit easier to look at. So what this is showing is traders were selling calls in the index components. We've already taken a look at a couple of those. That is SPX and SPY. This also includes ES and XPS. Initially, they sold a few puts. Then the put sellers took the foot off the gas. Then right around 9:55, they started buying puts and selling calls. All right, let's talk about Hero. So an individual posted a rather lengthy post in the Options-Jug chat channel last week, I believe it was on Friday, pointing out a discrepancy, what he or she thought was a discrepancy in the S&P 500 index signal and compared with price action, and saying Hero had zero impact on price action. That is a rather naive and uninformed view. So you can't just look at S&P 500, this index Hero signal alone, and make any total judgment about price action. There are many factors driving S&P 500. It's very complicated. It's an index of 500 stocks. Futures, traders are trading futures, SPX options, SPY shares, many components. And then all 500 S&P 500 stocks, both shares and options. All right, so let's take a look at this. So we can see that traders are selling calls and then not really doing anything with puts. So you can say here, if you just looked at this, you can say, well, Hero had a zero impact on price action. Well, I guarantee you that is not necessarily the case. All right, so let's drill down into this, and let's take a look at the other index signal available for the S&P 500. That's the S&P 500 equity signal. And when you're trading S&P 500, I'm looking at S&P 500 index signal, looking at the equity signal, and now we can see what was driving price. This is, remember I mentioned the bullish opening drive. Traders buying calls in the S&P 500 stocks. So that was right, what was driving price. Now I guarantee you the S&P 500 index signal had an impact as well. So if the S&P 500 index signal was going up just like this, I think the S&P 500 would have gone a lot higher. But here in the S&P 500 index signal, there was a downward force, and then the call buyers took the foot off the gas, and then price started to move lower. So the call buyers took the foot off the gas. So when traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy stock to hedge their delta exposure. Well, when that fuel driving price higher, those call buyers take the foot off the gas. Market makers no longer need to buy stock, and they can start selling their stock as traders start selling their calls. And then the put sellers pretty quickly took their foot off the gas. And we'll take a look at the Bookmap chart. Let's go ahead and do that right now. And by the way, this individual, I don't know why that was posted in the Options-Jug chat channel. If you don't like if you don't find value in your Spotgamma subscription, just cancel your subscription. All right, so let's take a look now at Bookmap. Go back to ES. All right, so we're looking at Hero, two versions of Hero, S&P 500 index signal and the equity signal. And now we're looking at a Bookmap ES futures. And by the way, I look at ES futures whether I'm trading futures, whether I'm trading SPX options, SPY options, or SPY shares, any version of S&P 500. That is, you're looking at this chart. All right, so I see three levels up here, Spotgamma levels that could potentially act as resistance. The 6745 zero gamma level, the SPY 673 volatility trigger, and then the SPX 6750 round number level. And just remember, just above that, the 6755 large gamma level. So as traders continue to sell calls in the S&P 500 index components, the S&P 500 equities started to roll over. S&P 500 reverse lower. ES, SPX, all reverse lower, down to the 6,700 level. So good for a 50-point plus move. So let's take a closer look at Bookmap now, so we can see the sellers were exhausted. That's shown by the smaller green volume dots. The volume dots in Bookmap show market buy minus sell. Green volume dots indicate more buyers than sellers, and magenta dots indicate more sellers than buyers. So you can see buyers are exhausted. Aggressive sellers starting to come in. Yellow line showing sell stop orders, helping to fuel that move lower. And note, large traders have been fading this move with iceberg orders. And note, they have not had much of an impact on price, maybe slowing down a move lower. But you could take a look at this and say, well, icebergs have no impact on price. I disagree, but again, it could be slowing the move down. But anyway, large traders buying with iceberg orders, smaller traders with their sell stop orders fueling that move lower. And now S&P 500 has broken down to lows of the day, and this is the ES lower daily expected move. And NJC, welcome, glad you're here. Ask, is it levels in white? So the white is showing Spotgamma levels. So this is just my convention. This is what I'm using to show the Spotgamma levels. I use an add-on, a Bookmap add-on called Price Lines to draw the levels and put the labels on the chart. And I fill out a spreadsheet every morning that has all that information. All right, so it was a choppy morning. ES SPX came up and tested this zero gamma level and the volatility trigger once again, and now reverse lower again. So let's go back to Hero now. All right, so we're on the equity signal, and so far really showing more of a stronger correlation to price than the index signal, at least earlier today. So we can see traders started to buy calls again, right? Somewhere between 11:15 and 11:30, started to sell puts. Again, took the foot off the gas. And right now, they are selling calls and buying puts. That's bearish momentum, and price is moving lower. All right, so that's the equity signal. Let's take a look at the index signal now. And you can see this has been overall for the day, showing the overall trend, which is down. All right, let's shift back to total now. I'm going to have to jump back. All right, let's take a look at the delta notional here at minus 9.4 billion. That's large. Same thing as the S&P 500 was doing several days last week. So in the index signal, negative delta notional of minus close to minus 9.4, that is significant. That's a large number. Let's check one other thing. So this is showing all trades, all expirations, And let's take a look at now the 0 DTE. So for the S&P 500, these components, the index components that we're taking a look at here, have options that expire every day. So this next expiry for the S&P 500 index signal would be options that expire today. So what this is showing is most of this, a good portion of this, is options that expire today, and that's pretty typical. The 0 DTE options traders driving price up and down, and so far it's been down, buying puts and selling calls. All right, let's turn that off. So the teal line was 0 DTE, and the purple line is the all components. All right, so let's take a look at NASDAQ now. I'm going to start with the NASDAQ index signal. So this is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the NASDAQ index components that we've already taken a look at. That is QQQ and NDX. Overall move down. Let's zoom in on the morning here. So this was showing an opening drive in the index components, and then traders started taking negative delta positions in the index components about 10 or 15 minutes before the NASDAQ rolled over, about 15 minutes. So let's go take a look at NASDAQ. NQ futures at Bookmap. So here's the bullish opening drive up to NQ 25,250, reversal lower, and then a big swing higher again, but making a lower high, and now NASDAQ heading down towards its lower daily expected move. All right, back to Hero. All right, so we know, looking at the index signal, it gave an early warning that price was going to move lower. All right, let's take a look at the other component, the other Hero signal we can take a look at for the NASDAQ, that's MAG 7. So this is showing options trades and market maker hedging activity for the stocks known as the Magnificent Seven: Apple, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla. All right, so this is showing a bullish opening drive, traders buying calls. That lasted for about a half an hour. And then the call buyers took the foot off the gas, came back in, and again, foot off the gas. And overall, actually painting somewhat of a bullish picture for today with positive delta notional. So traders net for the day are buying calls and selling puts in the MAG 7 stocks. And we'll take a look at several of those in just a minute. All right, so that's NASDAQ. Back to the index signal. So they're buying puts and selling calls in the NASDAQ index components, but doing the opposite of the MAG 7 stocks. All right, any questions about the indexes? All right, let's take a look at some of the index, the MAG 7 stocks, the big index components driving both the NASDAQ and the S&P 500. I'm going to start with Apple. So in Apple, there was looks like a delayed bearish opening drive. Apple finds support around the 267.50 put wall and started to reverse higher. Then the call buyers came in a little bit later. And by the way, if the Hero signal is not clear, I'm going to call it. And I'm calling it here that the call buyers were chasing. So that really doesn't matter. When traders buy calls, market makers sell the calls, and they have to buy stock that has delta exposure. So the call buyers started chasing as price started to move up. So the price had moved up from 267.50 up maybe a point or so. Then the call buyers came in, but then they took the foot off the gas as Apple came up to the 270 key gamma strike, full alert signal, significant options activity, and a potential reversal in hedging flow. And in this case, it was just call exhaustion. Call buyers take the foot off the gas, then they started selling calls. Not a clear call peak, but definitely call exhaustion. And then at that point, traders were selling calls, buying puts, price moved lower. All right, that's Apple. Let's go to Bookmap. And by the way, Apple was in the news. There was a filing, Berkshire Hathaway indicated they had continued to sell their Apple position in the last quarter. Now, I believe Apple is still Berkshire Hathaway's largest position. And we'll take a look at Google in just a minute. They initiated a position in Google. And we'll take a look at the reaction in Google. So here's the bullish opening drive. Apple did break down below its put wall at 267.50, but reversed higher. Call buyers came in. Exhaustion around 10 a.m. and then Apple reversed lower to a no low. All right, that's Apple. All right, so let's go to Google now, the other stock in the news. So you can see a bullish opening drive and then a beautiful reversal. So let's see what options traders are doing. So let's go to Google now. Let's zoom in. So this is a clear bullish opening drive. Flow alert signals significant options activity. Call buyers driving price higher. Traders buy calls. Market makers sell the calls. And they have to buy stock as they'll build exposure. And then price started to roll over. And then just a few minutes later, traders started selling their calls. Price reversed lower. Note net for the day. Traders have been selling calls, but also selling puts. So the put line is positive delta selling puts, but they're also selling calls. Looks like primarily the call sellers driving price. All right, so that's Google. Trading down around the lows of the, or down below the cash open shown by the large magenta volume dot. Next stock I want to take a look at is Meta. All right, Meta will see a nice call peak reversal. So let's go back to Hero. So this is in Google, a call peak reversal. A little bit delayed. Price started moving lower really before the call peak. So let's take a look now at Meta. Zoom in on this. By the way, these large vertical lines are large block orders, institutional orders. Large institution buying calls, and then quickly another large institution, maybe the same one, selling calls, and price versus lower. Very nice call peak. Full alert signals significant options activity and a potential reversal in hedging flow. That's exactly what happened. Very nice call peak reversal in Meta. Ways to play that: sell shares, sell a call spread, buy a put spread. All right, that's Meta. Next stock, Microsoft. Another brief bullish opening drive, reversal lower, and now a reversal higher. So zoom in on this. Few call buyers, put sellers for about the first 5 or 10 minutes. Full alert comes in. Reversal in the call signal. Traders start selling calls, buying puts. Microsoft reverses lower. That is bearish momentum when traders sell calls and buy puts. And Microsoft reverses lower. Let's go to Bookmap. Very brief, bullish opening drive. Call peak reversal lower. With the alert to signal significant options activity, a potential reversal in hedging flow. All right, back to Hero. All right, next stock, NVIDIA. Again, remember, NVIDIA reports earnings. After the close on Wednesday, of course, I will go over NVIDIA again on Wednesday. And also, I believe Brett will be talking about, maybe talking about Brent. We'll be talking about, or maybe talking about NVIDIA now in his webinar. And I believe that may be on YouTube. All right, so NVIDIA, another brief bullish opening drive. Call buyers take the foot off the gas. And traders that already started buying puts. And NVIDIA reverse lower. Right back to Bookmap. Let's go to NVIDIA. Pretty choppy, but overall downward trend. And interesting to see the cumulative volume delta here and all the magenta volume dots. And Anto, welcome. Glad you're here. I'll get to live market in just a minute. I had a lot to cover today. All right, so here's the NVIDIA. Brief bullish opening drive, then reversal lower. And target. Very obvious target. At the 185 level here. Those are limit buy orders. The heat map of Bookmap shows a history of limit orders in the Yoda book. Those are buy orders. And they can act as a magnet for price. All right, next stock, Tesla. And this was more of a sustained bullish opening drive. Now Tesla reversing lower. Let's see what options traders are doing. Traders buying calls, shown by the rising orange line. Tesla finds support at the 400 put wall, breaks above the 410 hedge wall, target at the 420 key gamma strike, and then after trading above the 420 key gamma strike, the call buyers finally take the foot off the gas right around noon, and now price moving lower. So bullish opening drive and then reversal lower, call exhaustion, aggressive sellers start to come in, shown by the magenta volume dots. All right, I had some other stocks to take a look at. Let's go back to the indexes and take a look, and then I'll see if I have time to get to these other stocks. All right, so S&P 500 continues to move lower, and ES is now broken down below its lower daily expected move. Let's check SPX, and again, that's the ES, lower daily expected to move. I do calculate that independently from the SPX, lower daily expected move. So let's go to the SPX. All right, so now SPX trading right at its lower daily expected move. All right, let's go back, take a look at Hero. And note the 6650 put wall is down below. That's the next key level. And let's take a look at, go back to Hero now. We'll take a look at Trace as well. All right, I'm going to shift the total signal. Go back to the S&P 500 index signal. All right, so that continues to move lower. And note the delta notional is about the same as it was before. So it looks like it has slowed down a little bit. Let's check the equity signal. All right, equity signal, very small in comparison, but does continue to move lower. Let's check Trace. All right, so it looks like there's a pocket of potential support down below 6650. Again, the put wall. Blue positive gamma down below. And SPX is approaching the Spotgamma one-day implied move low. So this is based on the opening price for SPX, based on Spotgamma criteria. The expected moves that I post are based on the options market, the standard expected move based on an options chain. All right, so Hero continues to move lower, but it looks like it has slowed down a little bit as SPX approaches this positive gamma zone down below, indicating traders are selling puts from 66.60 down to 66.15. And none of these are very large. And the candlesticks are getting smaller as well. Let's check charm pressure. This is showing buying support, selling pressure due to time decay. And this is showing the red zone selling pressure due to time decay. And then some buying support down below. This is showing a potential pin target at SPX 6630. So that would be quite a drop with SPX currently trading right around 66.73. All right, back to Gamma now. And back to Hero. Hero continues to, S&P equities, Hero continues to point lower. S&P 500 moving lower, but not quite as sharply as before as SPX approaches the Spotgamma implied one-day move low with the put wall at 66.50 down below. So that's another 24 points down below. All right, back to Bookmap. Note large traders continue to fade this move with iceberg orders. So they're still buying with iceberg orders. And that looks like a decent size. and that is based on when I open Bookmap, which is right around 6:30 a.m., something like that, Eastern Time. That's when the MBO data starts to collect. All right, questions? Anyone have any stocks they want me to take a look at? Let's check NASDAQ. Let's zoom in on this. Floyd's Garage wants to look at Oracle. All right, so NASDAQ NQ heading down towards its lower daily expected move. And it looks like I need to add in more NASDAQ levels in my spreadsheet. All right, let's take a look at Oracle again. I don't have Oracle on Bookmap. We can take a look in Hero. All right, negative for the day. Oracle has broken down below its 220 put wall and continues its move lower. Down below the put wall. All right, NASDAQ heading right for its lower daily expected move. ES. So the put wall is about 20 points away. And back to Hero. And we'll go to the S&P 500. Continues to move lower, almost negative 10 billion now. And a good bit of that, 0 DTE, driving price lower. And the S&P 500 equity signal continues to move lower. Much smaller delta notional than the S&P 500 index. Back to Bookmap. Let's check Trace again. So mildly positive gamma down below. Beginning with 6660, then intensifying down a little bit lower at the put wall, 6650. Check Charm again. So Charm is showing the potential price target down at 6630. So again, that would be a pretty big move. For the time remaining in the trading session. Back to Gamma. Note the stability index now has dropped down to 5%. That's very low. Looking for much more rapid price action. Oh, that changed 24% now. So jumping around a bit. Let's go back to Hero. Continues to move lower. Again, this is a very large number at almost minus 10 billion. We'll wrap it up by taking a look at Bookmap. Looks like some buyers have come in. You can see that in the heat map and Bookmap. Buyers for ES. Providing a little bit of support there. Then more buyers down below. Shown by the heat map and Bookmap. History of the limit orders in the order book. All right, everyone, a big day coming up on Wednesday. VIX expiration, FOMC minutes, NASDAQ reporting earnings after the close. And we'll talk about that all on Wednesday. Want to thank everyone for watching. Thanks for your questions and comments. Have a great afternoon, and I will see you on Wednesday. Thanks again. Bye.